We're excited about our speaker tonight because she has been working in this space for quite some time and will provide you with tons and tons of information that will help you in terms of having additional options. And at this time, regarding the state of education, it's important to have options, to know what those options are, and be able to access them if at all necessary. So we will be sending you a document at the end of the session when we send you the eval that will have many of the sources that Tilly will talk about tonight. And please ask questions, make sure that you're clear about those expectations regarding cyber schooling and what that looks like in regard to e-learning and remote learning and blended learning and all of these words that we hear now that we may not be familiar with. But this is an opportunity just to know that you do have options. And we always talk about the importance of knowing what choices you have, because here in Colorado, we have many, many choices. It's just a matter of us exercising those choices to meet the needs of our scholars. And that's what's most important. So one size doesn't fit all. And if you know that a particular educational option is not working, then what might work best for your scholar at that time. So thanks again for joining us tonight. And now I want to go ahead and turn it over to Tilly.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Deborah, for that great introduction. And I'm really glad to be joining Parents Challenge families tonight to talk about your cyber school and blended learning opportunities here in Colorado. And just a little bit about me. Again, my name's Tilly Elvrum, and I have been working in the online education space as a parent advocate and an online education advocate for almost 20 years now. And I'm a parent like you. My son attended full-time online schools. They were called Connections Academy, and he attended those schools in 3 different states over the course of 10 years. And he graduated in 2015 as an honors student. And right now he's finishing up his bachelor's degree at University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, and he's on the dean list. And, you know, him as a student, he had a learning difference. And online learning really met his needs. And I don't think he would be as successful as he is as a student had we not found the full-time online option. And it really set him up for success. And so I'm very passionate about online education and educational technology and online resources and how that can support our students and give them a really personalized education. And many of you here in the group, and I'm going to encourage you, if you want to turn your camera on, you can, but also introduce yourselves in the chat. Let me know the types of schools that your kids are using and why this particular webinar spoke out to you, and maybe any questions that you might have going into this presentation. And hopefully through the course of it, I will answer those questions. And if I don't know the answer, I probably know somebody who does. So I will do my best to get that information to you as we go. And so, you know, this is just going to be a time where we're going to go through. I'm going to show you the resources that are available to you in the state. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how do you evaluate an online school? What are the questions that you should be asking? And a lot of you right now, you may have had some experience with remote learning during the COVID-19 crisis and the school closures that we've all experienced this past year. And I'll just tell you, what you've experienced in your traditional schools through remote learning is a little bit different than what I experienced as a full-time online parent. And so we're going to kind of go through the differences between those and what you could expect in a full-time online program that might look different than what you've experienced with remote learning. So I have a little PowerPoint here. I'm gonna pull that up for you. Let me see here. Let's see, there we go. All right, so I'm with Colorado Coalition of Cyber School Families, and we have been operating in the state since 2004. We just celebrated our 17th annual day at the Capitol. And the other organization that I represent is Parent Support for Online Learning. And that organization, we support families in getting them the resources, the education technology, the applications, platforms that will help them support their students, whether they're doing full-time online learning, remote learning through their school, or maybe they're doing homeschooling and leveraging technology using that. So let's just start off. So again, like I said, many of you may have experienced remote learning during COVID-19 school closures. That's a little bit different than full-time online schools. And then there's a little bit of confusion where people think that online schoolers are homeschoolers or homeschooling families. And the way I like to kind of frame that is that we are public school students. We just learn at home or wherever we have Wi-Fi. And so the difference there is traditional homeschooling families, you are not in the public system, so your kids aren't held to the same public school standards. Your kids don't necessarily have to take standardized testing, and you're out there kind of creating the curriculum yourself. Whereas online schools, cyber schools in the state, we are public schools. So our kids have to meet the same attendance requirements, testing requirements, and the curriculum has to be aligned to state standards. And our teachers, they have real teachers that are certified in their content area. So that's the difference between full-time online schools and homeschooling. Full-time online schools, depending where you live in the country, they might be called an e-school, a cyber school, virtual school, or an online academy. Here in Colorado, we call them cyber schools. And then you'll hear some terminology. You'll hear hybrid or blended learning, and that really combines online learning and in-person instruction and wraparound supports. And so during remote crisis learning during COVID, we've heard some schools talk to hybrid. And what that is they have kids maybe coming in 1 or 2 days a week, and then the rest of the time they're offline. Traditionally, when we talk about blended and online learning, it's really talking about the curriculum, how it's delivered. And typically what we were talking about was students would get content and instruction online. Maybe they would watch a video about how to do a certain kind of science experiment or a math formula. And the blended or hybrid part came back. Instead of having the teacher do all that and send the kid home and do homework, and the kid get really frustrated because there was nobody there to help them, they learned all that content ahead of time. And then when they came back with the instructor, that's when they were getting their questions answered and doing work with the teacher and with their peers. And so that's traditionally what we considered hybrid and blended learning. Through this crisis, that definition's changed a little bit. But I think it's important for you to realize all the differences between all this new terminology that you might be hearing. And so just some information about online schools. There's some form of online education offered in every state. This was pre-COVID. COVID hit and everybody became an online learner or a homeschooler. And but also now there's over 30 states that have some kind of full-time online programs offered to students. But unfortunately, in some states, there are enrollment barriers. And we are very lucky to live in Colorado, where we took care of a lot of those arbitrary enrollment barriers like a decade ago. So basically, if you are a family here in Colorado and you desire a full-time online option for your student, you are going to be able to access one. So that is good news. Pre-pandemic, there were about 300,000 students attending full-time online schools in the country. That's gone up exponentially. Here in Colorado, we serve now, it's 32,400. We had a 40% increase in full-time online students since COVID hit. So that was a huge increase. And a term that you'll hear anybody talking about online education, they'll talk about synchronous learning, which is usually teacher-led, but it may be, through the computer screen, but there's a teacher leading that instruction. And then you'll hear about asynchronous learning, which is what your student will do. Sometimes it'll be online, sometimes it'll be offline, and a lot of times it's at your student's own pace. But they aren't in a online classroom doing that. They're doing that work on their own. But that's important for you guys to understand. Again, our first cyber school opened in Colorado in 1997, Monta Vista Online. It is still operating today, and it's a really great program. Our coalition, we've been here since 2004, working with families in the state and making sure that they have a voice at the Colorado Department of Education, at school boards across the state, and in the legislature. And there you go, 32,000 students. In any given state, there may be 1 to 5% of their student population accessing public ed in the online environment. Here in Colorado, we currently have 38 multi-district online schools. That means you can live in El Paso County and enroll your student in a multi-district cyber school that maybe is authorized out of Mapleton School District in Denver or in Durango. Then we have 11 single district online schools and 26 single district online programs. Those mean that you have to reside in that district to access those schools or those programs. So that's another important distinction for you to remember. And as we go through, I'm going to show you kind of the different schools and the different ways that you can access. So here, roles and responsibilities. I think this is a really important topic for parents and students to think about when they start thinking about if online education will be the right fit for your family. What's the responsibilities of the student? Daily attendance is required to attend live classes in many schools. Students are required to watch recorded classes, to complete their online coursework, to do offline coursework and activities. And as you do that as a parent, the way that you can keep students engaged and motivated is giving them input on their course selection, their scheduling, and their daily routine. For parents and caregivers, you really have a wonderful opportunity to be a partner in your children's education, into the daily day experience of your kids. And, just some basic roles and responsibilities. You need to be there to support your student with organization, providing some kind of routine for them during their school day, monitoring their progress through their courses. So making sure that they log in every day, that they are spending time doing their work, logging into their classes, doing attendance. A lot of that falls on parents at the end of the day to say, my student completed these lessons and did this many hours of work. And then you're also there to give one-on-one support when your student is learning. So that may mean you sit with them as they read a story, or you give them their spelling test, or those kinds of things. And it's a wonderful opportunity to be there as your students are learning. And then again, you're a partner with the teachers. So you develop really close relationships with your teachers, and you really become a really important part of your child's learning experience. And then what's the role of the teacher in all of this? Well, they're there to provide instruction. Like I said, in our Colorado cyber schools, you will have teachers that are certified and licensed, giving instruction to your students. They provide guidance. They provide support to students and feedback. So they're grading lessons and papers and quizzes. They're monitoring the students' progress through a course to make sure that the kids are staying on track and completing enough work to finish the course within the time that they need to. They're doing assessments. They're grading work. They're providing feedback. And they're working in partnership, again, with the students and the parents to make it successful. So those are the expectations and the roles for those three important players. Okay, so now we're going to dive into where do you even start to figure out how to access one of these 40 plus schools in the state. So the first way is the Colorado Department of Education. And all of the links in this presentation, like Deborah mentioned, we are going to send that out to you after this. So you'll be able to access this on your own. But should you, for some reason, you get to the Department of Education website, just type in this chat box up here, Unit for Blended and Online Learning, and it'll bring you to this page. And so you'll see again those terms, multi-district versus single district online schools. Here you'll see the multi-district schools. All of these schools here and here and here in El Paso County, you could enroll in any one of those schools. As long as they have an opening in the grade level that you're looking at, you can access any one of those schools. These schools here, single district online, you have to be a resident of those school districts to access them. So here you see Cherry Creek. You have to reside in Cherry Creek School District 5 to access that school, okay? And then here you'll see multi-district online charter, and you might be like, okay, I know what a charter is. This really basically goes to how the school is authorized. And so these schools are considered charter schools just by the way they're authorized through their governance. At the parent level, it doesn't really make much difference between the charter or just a multi-district online. But usually these multi-district online, they are authorized by a school district, but you don't have to reside in that district to enroll in it. My son, he attended Colorado Connections Academy, Mapleton, and you'll see there's another one here in Durango. They are the same program, same curriculum. Sometimes they may even share the same teachers, but they really felt like they wanted a school on the Western Slope so that they could serve those students a little bit better. It's, Colorado's a huge state. So that's the difference between those. But like I said, as El Paso County residents, you can access any of these three areas here. And as you go through every school that's up here in this part here, you'll go down, it'll tell you the name of the school, their address, what school district, who they're authorized by. So here we have District 70's online school. It is a multi-district online school. So kids in District 60 in Pueblo can enroll in this online program. But you'll see here, it's authorized by Pueblo County School District. There's a phone number. They all have a link to the website. They will tell you which grades are served. Some schools will only serve maybe kindergarten through middle school, and others may only serve middle or high school population. So make sure you check that as you're doing your research. You will also see they will have their performance framework. And so what that tells you is the information on how their students tested on CMAS testing. And so that's good information if you're really concerned about test scores, those kinds of things. You can find that information there. And you can go through, you know, and some even give you a little bit of a summary. And you'll notice here, this school, they only serve grades 6 through 12. So, you know, always take note of which grade levels that they support. You'll see here on this particular school, it says click to see NCAA course eligibility. So if you have a student who is really into sports and maybe they want to have a scholarship someday to college, make sure that their courses are NCAA eligible. That's kind of important to know if you have a kid who wants to do that in the future. But again, you can go all the way through, and all of those 38 multi-district schools, the 11 single district online schools, and then the other 11 single district programs. And when they talk about a program, sometimes that means they only offer maybe course access, or maybe they only serve a very small population of students within their district. And that's the difference between a program and a school. But again, you can go down, find all the information, click on that. It'll take you to the school's website, and there you can start doing your research. And we're going to talk about some of the questions, the things that you should be looking for and asking as you do that. And I'm going to click out of here and come back. The other resource that you can use is the Colorado Coalition of Cyber School Families website. And we'll get over here. This is our website. We have a resource page. Again, there's a lot of different resources here. Here's a link here that will take you to that Colorado Department of Education Unit for Online Learning page. And then other resources, the Charter League, the National Coalition for Public School Options, who is a leader in online education across the country. And then again, that list of approved schools and programs through the Colorado Department of Education. So that's another resource for you to tap into. Let me see if there's any questions so far. Let's see here. Let's see. So we have a question about structure. Okay, awesome. And then let's see, Scott Homan, hybrid schooling. Okay. Awesome. Awesome. All right. Very good. Well, I will keep that in mind as we continue with the presentation. And so hopefully we can answer some of those concerns or questions that you might have. So again, that's where you start. Researching the schools, trying to kind of get a feel of what they offer, what programs they offer. So online learning, and the next 3 slides are pretty wordy. There's really no way to make them very pretty, but they're important questions to ask. And this isn't going to be a comprehensive list because all of you know your kids well and your family situations. But these are like the frequently asked questions, or the questions that are really going to be important to you as parents as you kind of work to evaluate what these programs, how they're going to fit your family. So the first thing you're going to want to ask is, do students participate in synchronous or asynchronous instruction? And that is important because if you have a student that really thrives on the interaction of their peers and being able to ask questions with the teacher, if the bulk of that program, if they spend most of their time asynchronously working on their own, that might be an issue. So you want to ask, how often are they getting live classes from their instructors, and how much time are they learning on their own? And sometimes when they say asynchronous instruction, it may not mean that they're glued to the computer. They may be reading a book or doing a science experiment or something like that. But that's a good place and a good question to ask. Are live classes recorded for later viewing? Now, this was an issue that came up during remote learning, during COVID. Some schools, some teachers unions, they actually prohibited their teachers from recording instruction. That is not best practices for distance learning. Those lessons should be recorded, and the reason why is you have a student who for some reason misses a class. Maybe they're sick, maybe they had a doctor's appointment, maybe their internet went out, maybe they're a student that holds a job and has a kind of a crazy schedule. Those students need access to those instructional content from the teacher. And so the ability to watch those when it's convenient for the student is really helpful. And the other great thing is, say you have a kid who's struggling with a concept, maybe it's a new math formula. They can go back and watch that teacher do that lesson over and over until they get it. So always ask, are lessons recorded? Are live classes required? And what do students have to do to make up a missed class? A lot of classes, they do want kids logging in at a certain time. So maybe on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, they have English language arts, and they encourage the kid to log in to the live class with their peers, with the teacher. Find out, are they required? And if they are, what happens when a kid misses the class? Some schools, the student would have to do a particular homework assignment or do some kind of quiz to show that they participated in the class. So always ask those questions. Are students allowed to move at their own pace through the coursework? Can they move ahead? Can they slow down? This is great because if you have a student who is advanced, or maybe they've already covered this concept, or they're just really, they've already mastered it, they don't have to sit and wait for 30 other kids in their class to finish the assignment. They can go on and move on to the next thing, which is wonderful. On the other hand, maybe you have a student who is struggling and they need to slow down, and maybe it'll take them 2 days to learn that concept before they're ready to go on. And so find out how much flexibility a student is going to have to move through a lesson. Can parents access the school's learning management system through their own portal, their own account? During remote learning, we heard a lot about parents who couldn't access their kids' lessons. And maybe they had like 15 different logins for different, English classes, math classes, social studies, all those things. When you're in a full-time online school, and you'll hear the term LMS, Learning Management System, those are like already built in for the parents. And so you're not going to be having to juggle multiple logins, multiple passwords for your kids. If you have 2 kids in one online school, it's all going to populate there for you. And everything will be there, from the attendance log to your kids' classes, your kids' grade book. You can look at any time during the day and find out, how many times during remote learning maybe has this parent said, "Are you done with your school?" And the kid says yes. And then you've come to find out they're behind 20 lessons. Well, as an full-time online parent, you don't have those kind of gotcha moments. You really have access to know at any point in time how your kid's doing, what are their grades, what lessons have been graded, maybe what's pending, those kinds of things. So find out how you as a parent are able to monitor your kids' learning. How is attendance measured and recorded? Is it daily? Is it weekly? Is that on you as a parent? Is it on the school? Is it done automatically based on whether a kid logged into a class? What does attendance look like? And what are the requirements on you as a parent? How many hours are a student required to be logged in? Does offline work apply to attendance? There's always been a misconception that in an online school, learning only happens when the kid is online toggling their mouse. That's totally false. Our kids traditionally in full-time online schools, our kids will not spend 5 or 6 hours consecutively online in a Zoom session. They are doing work offline, they're writing, they're reading, they're doing science experiments, they're doing art lessons, they are doing PE, all of those things, but it doesn't necessarily have to happen online. The computer is the delivery model, and the online resources are just that. They are a resource, but they are not everything that encompasses a child's education in the online setting. So ask those questions. Is my kid going to be sitting for 6 hours straight? Do they get breaks? Those kinds of things. How many hours on average will the student be online or offline? And that depends on the student. Some days, my son, we finished our school day in 4 hours. And then we went on and he did his music lessons or went to sports practices, or, we supplemented his education in a lot of different ways. And then other days where it was hard, it was, maybe he was struggling with the subject or something. It might have been a 6 or 7 hour day. It all depends. It depends on the student, and it depends on how fast they work and how much support they can get from you and their teachers. How does the student support SEL, which is social and emotional learning? We all know that mental health has really been a challenge during this crisis, especially for families where they didn't choose online learning, where they were kind of thrown into it. And the truth of the matter is, even our online students, they have struggled, because just because our kids learn online doesn't mean they learn in isolation. And we have lost a lot of our in-person socialization and educational opportunities that we all took advantage of. And so, but even prior to that, you want to ask, are there counselors in the school? Are they available to students? And what kind of wraparound services does the school provide? And then what opportunities are provided by the school, like clubs, activities, in-person events where the kids can meet their classmates and their teachers. A lot of the schools, they make that a priority. In our school, I was called a community coordinator, which was a volunteer position, and I organized field trips and educational learning opportunities for parents in this part of the state of Colorado. And so ask, what are you doing to get kids the socialization experiences that every kid, craves? And then a lot of the schools have clubs. They have chess club, robotics, comic book club. We had a geocaching club where they got together like once a month with a teacher, met in a park, and they went geocaching together. So ask about those opportunities as well. How much contact are teachers required to have with individual students on a daily basis? So, how much are you going to be interacting with teachers? Are your kids going to have classes every day, multiple classes? And what's required of the teachers? Are they required to be making daily phone calls, weekly phone calls, monthly check-ins, those kinds of things? Find out how often you should expect to be hearing from your educators. How often are teachers required to meet with parents? Are there parent-teacher conferences? Those kinds of things. Does the school have its own secure webmail system? Again, Student privacy and student data is very important. And so many of the schools have their own closed webmail systems. So that means nobody from outside can access those systems. They're not going to be receiving spam or inappropriate content or any of those things from outside of the school. So that's a high priority for our schools. Secure classrooms. Who has access to the live classes and the email systems? Some of you during COVID, during remote learning, might have heard of Zoom bombing, where somebody would have been in Zoom and all of a sudden somebody who wasn't part of the school community came into the online Zoom session and posted inappropriate content. That will not happen with our cyber schools. Many of them have their own proprietary online classrooms, which are secure, and the teachers are there. The kids aren't in those classes without adult supervision. So that's another important question to ask. Does the school supply, oh, sorry, I missed one here. Are they required to participate in state testing? And for Colorado cyber schools and our blended schools, the answer is yes. We are public schools, so our kids are required to test, and we encourage students to do that. It helps us understand how they are doing. And of course, in Colorado, we're an opt-out state. So as a parent, you can opt your student out, but you need to ask, what does state testing look like in your school? In many of the schools, they reserve sites all across the state because they are serving students all across the state. And your kid would go, they try to make the drive no more than an hour. So you're not having to go very far. And you go, maybe it's at a hotel or a university where they have a room set up with the laptops, and your kid will test. They'll be proctored by teachers from the school, and highly encourage that you do that, because our schools are held accountable and based on their participation in state testing. So you should know that. And then what other kinds of tests are happening within the school system? So are they doing diagnostic tests at the beginning of the year, middle, end of the year? That's just good information for parents to know, because that information can help you evaluate how your kid is doing in school. And then does the school supply a laptop or a desktop computer? And do they provide Wi-Fi hotspots or internet subsidy? We know a lot of families struggle with this, and a lot of the schools, if you have a need, they will provide you with either a laptop or a desktop computer. Some of them will provide you with a hotspot if you do not have internet at home, or maybe the internet isn't great at home. And then some of our schools will provide an internet subsidy, maybe every month or every quarter. And a lot of times it doesn't pay for all of your internet, but it sure helps. And so for us, we were grateful that our school provided that to us. And for some schools, if you are free and reduced lunch family, if you fall into that category, they can help you with your internet. So ask those questions as well. Another important question for families is, can we work through school holidays or take days off during the school year? And flexibility within the online model is really important. Some schools are more flexible than others. For our family, we logged into school everywhere from the Olympic Peninsula in Washington State to the Outer Banks of North Carolina. And we were very fortunate. At one point, we were on an RV trip, and my son was doing his algebra class online, going 75 miles an hour down the highway. And so that afforded us the ability to stay in touch with family members. My husband travels a lot for work, so we were able to go with him. We would often do school in a hotel room during the day and still be able to have dinner with my husband at night, which was a real a blessing to our family. But find out the kind of flexibility you will have to do that. You know, maybe you want to work during Christmas so that you can take off a week after Christmas or something. Ask those questions. Can we do it? What would we need to do to make that happen? And how, you know, and maybe we did that, but we logged in. So sometimes that meant he was logging into a class at 6 a.m. Or at 5 p.m. and because of the time difference. But ask those questions, they're important. Does the school provide textbooks, art supplies, science kits? A lot of times the schools are providing those to you. They're providing actual textbooks, workbooks, the manipulatives that kids need for math. We kind of called it Christmas in July. That's when we usually would get the box with everything we were going to need for the upcoming school year. And it was always fun to see the art supplies and the science kits that would show up for the new school year. But find out what kinds of things that the school will provide to you. And then, does the school provide tech support for the computers and the programs? There is nothing worse than when you have an issue with technology and you don't know how to fix it. With the full-time online schools, many of them have their own tech support. It was wonderful for us. We were able, if we had an issue, I called and they could actually take over the school computer and they would say, oh, you got, you know, this version of Windows is old and we need to update it. And they would update it for me or walk me through how to fix something. So that's important. If you're like me and you're not necessarily the world's greatest technologist, that's a great feature to have in a school. And this is the last of our questions here. Can students earn college credit via dual enrollment or concurrent enrollment? Do they have AP classes or honors courses available? This is important if you have a student who is advanced or gifted and talented. You know, you want them to have access to the courses that are going to challenge them and prepare them for college. And so find out what kinds of courses are available to them. If you have a student who English is a second language, or a student with a learning difference or a behavior challenge, does the school support those students and how do they do it? Do they have, you know, do they support students with IEPs and 504s as public schools? They do. But you want to find out what that looks like in an online setting. Does that mean they're getting one-on-one with the teacher? Are they doing small group work with fellow students? Teletherapies like occupational therapy or speech therapy, is that delivered online? Or is there an in-person component? So ask those questions. And then, does the school provide orientation for new parents and students? And then do you get continual training through the school year and as your student progresses through the grades in your online school? It's really important for families to get the training that they need to operate the technology and to understand the online resources that are provided to them. And so we highly encourage schools to give students and teachers and parents as well their own onboarding. And so ask about that, you know, what kind of training am I going to get before I dive into this? And what kind of support will I have after if I have questions? And then, does the school have parent representation on the school board or at the authorizer level? You know, parent voices are really important. So find out how you as a parent can be engaged in the school community and in improving that and sharing concerns and sharing your ideas on how to make it better. Some schools have their own accountability, parent advisory boards or accountability committees within their schools, but ask about that. And then, how can parents and students provide feedback about lessons or courses? In my son's school, every single lesson, I could rate it and he could rate it as a parent. And we could provide information to the curriculum department. There was one time where the lesson, it had a link in it that was broken and it didn't work. So we just sent a message and said, this lesson was not complete because we couldn't access this link. We got a call the next day from the curriculum department that said, thank you for telling us, and we fixed it. So that's important. And then finally, when can we enroll in this school? Right now in Colorado, the open enrollment window is open. So families are already starting to think about what they're going to do in next fall for their students. And then find out, can I enroll right up until the first day of school? Ask that question. And then sometimes we have families that come December, the end of the first semester, they think, what, we have to make a change. Find out if they have mid-semester or semester enrollment periods. That's, another great question to ask is exactly when can I get this process started and how long is it going to take? Next steps. So you've already done a great thing here because you've logged into this webinar and you're starting your research now. Start researching those options. I encourage you to look at 3, 4, 5, whatever number feels comfortable to you. But even within the online model here in Colorado, we have a diverse array of schools. We have schools that cater to career technical education. We have the full-time online schools, and then we have blended programs, schools like Goal Academy or Hope, and even AIM Global has drop-in centers where students can go in and get help as they need it. And for some kids, that means they go every day. And they may go into the learning center or drop-in center for 3 hours, 4 hours every day, because that's how they work best. Then there's other students, they never set foot in it. They don't need that support. But to know that is really important. So do your research on the different types of schools, ask about the curriculum, and then go to these in-person or online info sessions. Most of them are online right now due to COVID. But I highly encourage you to attend those info sessions. And on every school website, they'll tell you where you can log in for those. And those are great because you'll talk to teachers, you'll talk to currently enrolled families or alumni of the school. You'll also be able to see the curriculum, the technology, and get your questions answered. All those questions I just asked you, you can ask those in those info sessions. Also, if you have a student with any type of special need or concern, or they're on a 504 or an IEP, receiving any kind of accommodation in the current school you're in, ask to talk to the counselors, ask to talk to the head of special education or their learning support team to find out, share what's going on with your kid, your concerns, and so that they can kind of talk you through how they support students who might be facing, any kind of challenge, whether it's a health issue, a behavior issue, or maybe, you just life is, something's happened within the family and it's important for them to know. So I encourage you to do that. Lastly, don't delay. Start planning ahead now if you're really serious about going down this path, because as we've seen, we saw a huge jump in enrollment and the demand for these schools is high right now because of COVID. And I think there are many families who experienced remote learning and they found out, what, my kid really thrived in this type of learning environment and we want to do this full time next year. And so start doing your homework now, start attending those in-person info sessions, and don't wait until the day before school to make a decision, because what will happen, it's not like you can just drop your kid off at the local brick and mortar and they walk in and they probably have a desk for them and a set of books. Here, they will have to order your curriculum, your supplies, coordinate getting you your computer. You're going to want to get your internet set up, all of those things. And that takes a couple weeks. And you don't want your kid to start off the school year behind. So like I said, start doing your research now. At this time, I'll take any questions. If anybody has questions, you can either do it through the chat or turn your microphone on. Gee, I must have answered all your questions.
Looks that way. Oh, there is one in the chat from Scott Oman that says, what would you say the biggest challenge is?
So the biggest challenge, I think, for families, obviously, if you're brand new to online learning, one of the biggest things is just kind of figuring out the routine and what's going to work for your child. And honestly, probably our first 6 months, my son was in 3rd grade when we started. I was a nervous wreck because this was my baby and I didn't want to mess it up. And what I quickly learned is I had a lot of support from the school. And eventually, when we started, this was really at the dawn of online learning. Now, there's great organizations like the Colorado Coalition of Cyber School Families and Parent Support for Online Learning, and parents who have done this now for 2 decades. And they are there to support you, answer your questions. Motivation for students, that's another big question we get. And there's lots of different things that you can do. But, when you're first starting out, I think the biggest things as a parent that you can do to set your kid up for success is to get organized. And that doesn't mean you necessarily have to have like a home classroom or anything like that. But your student needs a place where they can sit and where it's relatively quiet and have all the materials there that they need, their workbooks, their pens and paper, a printer, those kinds of things. And then just be there for them. And sometimes that means it may not be you. Maybe it's grandma or an auntie. Maybe it's, your neighbor. A learning coach could be any trusted adult. It doesn't always have to be you. So if that means that you're a working parent and maybe your student, if they're a high school student, they may be home learning on their own and you come home in the evening and you go over what they did and you ask them questions like, okay, show me how you did that problem, or, show me the paper that you wrote today. It can look like a lot of different things, and families have found, ways to make it work over the years. But just get organized, help your kids develop a routine that makes sense for your family. Every family's different, but just give them, the routine, the organization, and the support and the grace to know it's going to be hard. And some days are great, some days are hard. And there are some days where, mom needed a break, son needed a break, and we took a break. And we said, we're going to go walk around the block, or we're going to go to the park, and we're going to just let it all out. And then we come back and everything's, better. And we just get back to it. So it's just kind of a mindset, and it takes a little bit to figure it all out, but give yourself the patience. Let's see, Eva's asking, do most cyber schools support kids with learning difficulties? Yes, my son has a learning difference. He's been on an IEP since he was in 1st grade. He's now in college, and he still receives accommodations at the college level for his learning difference. For our family, the way that it was really supported, online learning allowed us to really kind of slow down, and it allowed us to go back and fill in some of the gaps that he had in the traditional setting. And it was a blessing for my student to have that flexibility. You know, most of his struggles happened in math and science. Those were really hard subjects for him. And he was able to slow down and master concepts before moving on. And so that was definitely a benefit. And he received learning support through the school. So he did small group work with learning support. And then also he had a lot of one-on-one help through special education teachers within his school. So yes, they can do that. And for many kids, the online setting, some of the struggles that they have automatically go away because they're not dealing with the distractions of the classroom, or the fact that, you know, the teacher presents content one day and then the next day they move on. So just by the way online education is delivered, it eliminated some of those problems for students with learning differences. Let's see, generally, are middle schoolers able to do the work individually without someone being there? Yes, but again, it's a skill that, and middle school's hard, I'll tell you that much, because the expectations go up for your kids. And also the other transitional year that's difficult for any kid, and no matter what type of school they're in, is their freshman year. And it is because expectations are going up and the workload increases. So, you know, my suggestion for those students who maybe have a difficult time staying on task on their own is you create a daily schedule for them, and you give them lots of ways that they can kind of break lessons into chunks. And in full-time online schools, they do a lot of that for you. When a kid is moving through a lesson, it's kind of compartmentalized for students. So there's natural places where a kid could take a break or ask for help, or a place where you could say as a parent, okay, you're going to work on this section of the lesson, and when you're done, you're going to tell me, and I'm going to come and we're going to move on to the next thing. So there's some natural places where you can check in on your student. Another great tip for middle schoolers or any kid that has a hard time staying on task, or sometimes kids get lost in a lesson. They start really getting into it. And in some schools, you know, if you finish a lesson and you do an assessment at the end and you did well, you automatically get moved. My son sometimes, before I knew it, he had went through 3 lessons if it was something that he was really passionate about and it was a subject that he did really well in. So use a timer. That it's so simple. Use the timer on your phone, you know, and tell the student, you know, for the next 20 minutes, you're going to read this chapter, or you're going to work on your spelling or your handwriting, whatever it is. But using a timer is a great way to keep you on track and make sure that you're getting everything you need to get done through the school day. Any other questions? I'll just share again. Let's see, where am I here? If you can't think of anything now, but maybe later you have a question, some resources for you. The other organization that I represent is Parent Support for Online Learning, and we serve cyber school families doing remote learning through their school district during COVID, and then homeschool families. And so we provide a lot of resources in our Facebook group and then on our website. And so I encourage you to check that out. Even now, as you're completing the school year, we want to be a resource for you. And all you have to do is search Parent Support for Online Learning on Facebook. And then we also have our own website. And again, the links for those resources, Parents Challenge will share with you after this webinar is over. And again, there's my email, tlvrum1@gmail.com, my phone number. I am here anytime that you need any kind of advice. If you have questions on schools, I probably know a parent who has attended them or can get you in contact with somebody at the school. It's always great to talk to another parent who's done it. And like I said, if I don't have questions, or if I can't answer your questions, I probably know somebody who does. And we want to be a resource to you. Oh, let's
So
see.
Tilly, there is one more question. What it says, do you have any suggestions on expectations?
So expectations, that's another great question. And now I'm wishing I would have added another slide, although I know I hit you with a lot of information. We've actually put together a really nice poster with online learning expectations that kind of sets the tone for your student's day. And so it's a nice visual reminder for students to think about, okay, this is what's expected of me today. And so that's, are all your books together? Is your computer charged? Do you have your microphone set up? Do you have pen and paper? Like all of these things that kind of help with the day-to-day. Expectation-wise, I think it's really helpful as a family if you sit down and set the expectations. In our home, we had a conversation early on that when we came into our classroom, that it was school time. And I was the learning coach. I will always be your mother, but during these hours, I'm learning coach, and your job is to learn, and my job is to help you as much as I can, and to do that in partnership with your teacher. And the expectation is that we're going to get school done. And, we kind of always set our schedule with, whenever his buddies in the neighborhood went to school, that's when we started school. And our goal was to be done when they got done so that he could hang out with his buddies and go to sports practice like he always did. So, setting expectations is important, and kids need that, and they appreciate having those kinds of guardrails. And it really does serve you well in the online setting. And, I'm always happy to talk more about, how you do that, what it looks like in a day, a week, a month for an online family. And then also to talk about those strategies for student engagement and motivation, because it's a challenge for everybody, but it can be done. And I want to help you get through all those challenges. Thank you again, everybody who's logged in, and you'll get all of these links that I've shared with you and that list of questions as well. So you can go back, and as you're going to these in-person learning sessions or going to the CDE website, you'll have those questions in mind and can start thinking about, also what you need to ask and what you need to know as a parent as you kind of navigate all the options.
All right. Well, if there's no more questions, if you could all just give Tilly a round of applause. We definitely appreciate you being here and sharing all that awesome information. And we definitely hope that you guys got something from it. So whether you are already a homeschool family or online family, or if you're considering the online cyber school route, I hope that this presentation helps you kind of get started and gives you, questions to ask and things to look forward to. And again, we will send out that information to you guys along with the session evaluation. So thank you again, Tilly.